Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I hope you have returned revived, refreshed, and ready for a spot of politics. What could be better on a Wednesday lunchtime? Every generation of food and farming businesses, for eternity probably, has always felt the uncertainty and concern that accompanies changes in political policy. From the abolition of the Corn Laws way back in the 1840s to joining the EEC to leaving the EU, with many other examples in between. But some would say that confidence in agriculture is currently at a bit of an undeniable low. Last week's FarmDex report from McCain Foods said that 51% of the 200 farmers that they spoke to for their survey had considered leaving the industry in the last year due to financial strain, and 50% thought they might quit over the next 10 years. Why? Well, you don't really need me to tell you, but some factors that could be driving that are the end of BPS, the basic payment scheme, which is certainly beginning to bite, a lack of faith and uncertainty about the agri-environment schemes that are set to replace BPS, plus the new land use framework that's set to come in early next year. Also, changes to inheritance tax for farm businesses, and that is added, I guess, to the increased national insurance payments and wage bills, and that is an awful lot of uncertainty for farmers to hang their hats on. So it's against that context that we present our political session. Agriculture is, of course, a devolved power. Over the next hour and a bit, we're going to be hearing a political and policy perspective from both Scotland and Wales, but we are going to start in England. Dame Angela Eagle is the Minister of State for Food Security and Rural Affairs, a post she took up just over 2 months ago. After a year as Minister of State in the Home Office. She served as a minister under both Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and was first elected as an MP back in 1992, which means she has had the pleasure or pain, depending on how you look at it, of working in the House of Commons for 33 years. She's in charge of food and farming at DEFRA now, and we are really thrilled that she's been able to join us here today. Dame Angela.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for emphasising my longevity. I prefer to call it experience, but I'm certainly not going to take responsibility for the Corn Laws. But I think that what you said actually does demonstrate that there are always ongoing challenges in the farming sector and the agriculture sector, no matter how big a part of GDP it happens to be at the time. And that's partially because it's inherently a fluctuating thing, not least if the weather was the only input, it would still fluctuate. But as we know, there are many more inputs than that. And I think it's also one of those things that many people don't take much account of, but it's actually absolutely vital for all of us in this country, because you provide the food that we eat, ensure that the water that we need to survive is also of a reasonable standard, or at least can have an effect on that if things aren't done properly. So I'd like to thank Robert for the invitation to speak to you here today, and all of you for coming to listen to me. I'm pleased to be here after 2 months in my role, as was pointed out, as Minister of State for Food Security and Rural Affairs, and to be speaking to so many stakeholders from the agricultural sector. The AIC itself provides the farmers of our nation with the resources they need to put food on our tables, the wheat in our bread, the fertiliser to grow our crops, the tractors to farm our land. All of those supply chains that are absolutely essential are what are facilitated via this organisation. And the government wants to support you in your commitment to profitable, sustainable farming, because farmers and agriculture play a vital role in our country, with nations globally as well managing conflict, climate change, supply chain disruption. Food security is more important than ever, and I think it's actually on the agenda politically more than I ever thought it would be when I first went into the House of Commons. I wasn't expecting 20% of the world's grain supplies to be disrupted by a war in Europe, on European soil, with Russia, for example. And those kinds of new contexts do provide much food for thought to how we can adapt and adopt to the new situations we're in. And that is without the unpredictability of climate change. So one thing I stand by is the belief that the primary purpose of farming has been and always will be to produce food that feeds the nation. It's not a surprising thing, I hope, for me to say. And doing some reading around all of this, I noted that in the run-up to the Second World War, we only produced about 39% of our food, and we managed to flex that with Dig for Victory and other things to about 80%. So I think that one of the things we've got to think about as we approach these uncertain times is how we can recalibrate to have that kind of potential, not only to increase our own food production because that's what we want to do, but also to think about how we can have that flex in case we need it in a very much more unpredictable world. So I firmly believe our environmental land management schemes are the way forwards to support farmers' transition to sustainable food production, because healthy soils, abundant pollinators, clean water are the foundations that farm businesses rely on to produce food to a high standard. I've heard from farmers who want to see improvements in the schemes. After having been briefed on them, I want to see improvements in the schemes as well, and I recognise there's more work to be done to get them right. We'll look at how best to improve and simplify them so they address the unique challenges different types of farmers have and are more accessible to all. With that being said, I'm pleased to see that over half of farmers are now in schemes that help nature, like the Sustainable Farming Incentive, the Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier and Landscape Recovery. Funding for these schemes is going to increase from £800 million in 23-24 to £2 billion by 28-29. So more farms can reduce reliance on expensive chemicals, make soils more fertile and leave space for wildlife to thrive. The best farmers know that restoring nature is important for securing future economic growth, and we will continue to invest in it, which is why we've already opened the new Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier for those who've been invited to apply. I know that many of you are waiting for more information on the Sustainable Farming Incentive offer, which we will provide you with as soon as possible. I have some decisions to make quite soon about that, and I just wanted to say we are listening to ensure that we try to get this right. Our schemes aren't the only way we're helping farmers to succeed, because as well as food producers, we see farmers as business people who deserve to turn a profit. As many of you know, and I think I've seen her, Baroness Minette Batters is somewhere in the room. There you are. Many of you know that she's recently finalised her independent profitability review. I know that she spoke at your dinner last night. I don't know what, if anything, she's revealed about what she's handed to the government. But we're grateful for her hard work on the review, and we're looking at all of the recommendations. The review is going to be published soon, and we'll consider everything that she says in it and respond appropriately. We're already doing plenty to help support a profitable British farming sector. We're removing barriers to trade to support growth in agricultural economy. This will open doors for farmers to sell their world-leading products in new markets. And I want to reassure you, we'll always seek to protect farmers in future trade deals. We have to consider the impact of trade deals and what they'll have, the impact they'll have on our agricultural sector to get the balance right between domestic production and international trade. But we also want more exports from the trade deals that we manage to do. DEFRA currently has 16 agri-food attachés around the world, and my colleague, the Secretary of State, and I recently met with all of them who work to resolve export barriers and open new markets for our sector here. In 2024, this network successfully resolved 65 market access barriers worth an estimated 266 million a year. So far in 2025, we've unlocked an estimated 100 million in export opportunities and resolved more than 40 trade barriers, which include securing access to world-leading markets in Vietnam, Egypt, and Mexico. We're committed to using free trade agreements to create more export opportunities for the agri-food businesses in our economy. A message we've heard loud and clear from Robert and the team at AIC and the business as across the sector is the importance of tackling trade barriers that have arisen since we left the EU, which is why we're entering a new chapter in our relationship with the European Union, our closest partner and the biggest market, accounting for 57% of UK agri-food exports. So the SPS agreement we're negotiating with the EU will reduce frictions for business and cut out up to 5.1 billion a year to our economy in the long run. Now, alongside these current offers, we're taking decisive action to build a prosperous future for British farmers, and we want to work with all of you to bring that about. We're investing in cutting-edge technologies that help grow more food at lower costs and working with all food producers to make sure farmers get a fair deal for their efforts. Our Farming Innovation Programme is DEFRA's flagship vehicle for innovation investment, and as part of the UK's modern industrial strategy, and I'm very pleased that it's part of this country's modern industrial strategy, we've committed to spend at least 200 million up to 2030 to improve productivity and trial new technologies in the agricultural sector. Looking to the long term, we're working with farmers, farming and environmental organisations to develop the farming roadmap, which will set the course of farming in England for the next 25 years. We will publish this early next year. Our aim is to maintain food production, meet our environmental outcomes and deliver a thriving and profitable farming sector. We're committed to an ongoing process of working with you to improve the roadmap as we learn from farmers what they need to succeed. So I'm hoping this will give us a strategic sense of direction which we can combine with the Baroness Batter's review and the land use framework so that we can all get a sense of the direction that we're going in and what the possibilities are. Farmers obviously also want to receive a fair price for their products, and as government we've committed to tackling contractual unfairness where it exists. So introducing fair dealings regulations to help mandate clearer and more transparent contracts where businesses buy agricultural products from farmers. As you'll know, the department appointed Richard Thompson as the agricultural supply chain adjudicator in 2024. He's responsible for ensuring that fair dealing regulations are adopted across the industry. We're introducing what I have a proportionate regulations with a sector-by-sector approach, enabling targeted regulation to address specific issues raised by farming communities. New regulations have already come into force in the pig and dairy sector. I think they're being co-produced slightly slowly. I would like to see them go a bit faster, but there you are. Proposals for regulations in the egg and fresh produce sectors have been shared with the industry and are available for anyone who wants to engage in their development. And we're also working to launch a consultation for the combinable crop sector too. In our plans for the wider food system, in July this year, DEFRA set out its policy vision for a good food cycle to drive better outcomes from a UK food system, a system that's healthier, more affordable, more resilient and more sustainable. The good food cycle identifies 10 priority outcomes, and we're now developing plans to support these outcomes with a particular focus on securing resilient domestic production, generating growth that delivers for the economy, but also supports health and environmental outcomes, improving food price affordability and access. Through the food strategy and farming roadmap, we want to address the fundamentals of how the food system works to improve both farm profitability and sustainability. We can now make things work better for farmers, food production and nature, with government as enablers and farmers as leaders. Working in partnership, we can secure the prosperous and sustainable future that farming and our countryside deserves, and I hope to work with all of you to try to bring that about as quickly as possible now I'm in DEFRA. Thank you very much.
Angela, thank you very much indeed. We're going to take some questions now. Do put your hand up, give me a wave if you would like to ask a question. Also, you can type them into Slido. We've got a few coming in on that already. I just want to start with a quick question, if that's okay. We heard yesterday the Secretary of State, Emma Reynolds, was speaking to the EFRA committee, and she said that Minette Batter's review into farm profitability will be published before Christmas. Why the delay? It was meant to be mid-October, wasn't it? What's going on?
Well, Minette, as I'm sure she'll confirm, got it given to us. We got it on the 31st of October. We are just assessing all of the many comprehensive recommendations that she's made, and we'll be in a position to publish it with some of our responses before Christmas.
Yeah, sorry, that's mid-November I meant, not mid-October. That would have been a miracle if you'd done that, wouldn't it?
That's quite fast for Whitehall.
Is it?
Yeah,
You've
definitely
got a lot to look at, have you?
Yeah, it's a big piece of work, and it requires and deserves to be treated appropriately, and the response needs to be appropriate and serious rather than fast.
Okay, and just one other quick question from me. I mean, you stressed there the importance of the environmental land management schemes, how committed you are to the sustainable farming incentive, etc. Do you know, there is a real feeling of uncertainty in the farming industry about what is happening. When are we going to know about these things? And you say there'll be some certainty in due course. You also say that you've got some decisions to make on SFI. What are those decisions, and when are you like to be able to make them?
Well, I'm certainly looking at, obviously, we had the reshuffle, and that sort of stops everything a bit while new ministers come in and get briefed on what's going on. And I was very concerned to learn a bit more about how the schemes work. I was quite surprised there were 110 different things that you could do to claim for. I've had them in to show me how you actually physically claim on the IT system we've got, because I want to understand what it feels like from the other side. And my instinct is that we need to think about simplifying them and focusing them. And I'm also particularly aware that we've got, the farming industry is quite unusual in that it's got some very large players at the top and a very long tail of small farming businesses. And I've asked for distributional analysis so I can see where the money's going to help inform decisions. So I've been asking quite a few questions about what room for manoeuvre to try to modernise and simplify that I've got. And so we'll be in a position to make some decisions, and I'm certainly aiming to get clarity for people out there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, as quickly as possible, but no sort of firmer timescale.
I'm not going to give you a firmer timescale here, but I'm aware of how important it is to get certainty as quickly as possible. But I don't just want to grind a scheme on for the sake of it if I think it's misfiring in particular ways.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll take some questions from the floor first of all. I know there was a hand up just over here. The lady in the turquoise. I think we've got a roving mic. Oh, you've got the roving mic. Fabulous. If you can say who you are first before you ask your question.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
I'm Ali Kappa. I'm a farmer on the Herefordshire Worcestershire border, hops and apples. And for about 10 years, I've represented the horticulture sector in many guises. Angela, I think we're really lucky to have somebody with the depth of experience you've got in government, especially in such a complex sector, because agriculture and horticulture, to get your head around the complexity is going to take that depth of experience, especially when it comes to working with other departments. We've already heard this morning that some of the relationships aren't always great. I didn't hear you mention energy in your speech this morning, and I just want to flag that. Yep. Our energy prices in the UK are 3 to 4 times higher than they are in continental Europe, and we are facing into the threat now of a 94% increase in standing charges. There are some exemptions for the agricultural sector, but they don't include fruit and vegetables. They don't include the healthiest part of our diet. So the glasshouse sector and the stored crop sector, so apple, potatoes, etc., we have written to you and we are looking for some help, please. Because the fear is, if we don't have that help, we are going to see these energy price increases drive further food inflation. So please, could you give that your attention?
Certainly, I promise to give it my attention. I've visited some horticulture. I think strawberries down at Lowe's. I visited them not long ago. I do think that the horticulture sector doesn't always fit neatly into the schemes, for example, because of the size of land that tends to get used. And obviously, I'm also committed to trying to break the link between poverty and obesity. That's part of the good food cycle. And something's gone very wrong with the way that that link has been established and has got stronger. And part of the answer to that has got to be more fruit and vegetables. So I'm very, very aware that the sector needs particular attention. I'm glad that you've raised that issue with me, and I'll certainly go back and consider what can be done.
Okay, any more questions from the floor? I think what I'll do is I'll take one from Slido first, and then we'll come back to a question from the floor after that. We've got a question here. Could the Minister provide an overview on the role of imports to our food and farming sector, noting that we have import dependencies? How do we get the balance right with our own domestic sectors?
Well, I think there's a resilience issue which has come up and come to the fore in a way in the last few years, which I don't think would have been the case when I first went into Parliament, for example, that people have become more aware as the political situation globally has darkened, as climate change has begun to affect supplies, that we've got to be a little less cavalier about whether we're getting our food from imports or exports, and ensure that we've got a resilient sector ourselves. I personally also want to see farming more productive and profitable, and part of that has got to be to try to improve our export performance if we possibly can with the free trade deals. So I'm trying to look at it at all ends to see how we can best help particular sectors. It's a bit difficult to generalise, I think I've learned in the last couple of months about what the issues are across the piece. You've got to look more in terms of context to see what can be done and what the issues are.
Okay, I've got another question here, which is a really interesting one, I think. How can DEFRA work better with the Department for Business and Trade? It's something that came up a little bit earlier today. My main contacts at the moment with the Department for Business and Trade are to talk about how particular trade deals are going and what the implications for our own farmers might be if particular things are agreed. As it happens, I get on very well with the Trade Minister and have known him for a very long time. So we've spent more time together than I think has been the case in the past. But all too often, people think because the size of our sector is such that they can give away access to our markets. I mean, the cliche is, you let our cars in and we'll let you do what you like with our sort of meat, protein usually. Yep. So we're trying to make a lot more fuss about that to make people aware that there's real growth potential in our farming sector from potential exports, and that we shouldn't be just assuming that the trade will be one way. But likewise, we've got to balance our own animal welfare standards with other countries' access to our markets.
Okay. Minister, what can we do to support you with that? That's a really good message in there.
Well,
how do we help?
We haven't sort of mobilised this yet, but I've made a sort of verbal agreement with the Trade Minister to try to have an export roundtable event for this sector in the Department of Business and Trade. So we're trying to see if we can make more connections, firstly starting out because we're personal friends, but also to try to get other people to see this sector as a really important sector that we can actually grow well, and we can begin to put some of that trade balance back into into balance rather than see it so skewed towards imports.
Yeah. Another question that touches on this obviously as well. What specific percentage increase in UK grown supply are you aiming for by, say, 2030? And what metrics and timelines will you publish to hold the government to account? That comes from David Coop.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because we've been through a period where there's been a complete laissez-faire attitude to the agriculture sector. It's like, go out, do what the market wants. The market will decide whether we import, export. We don't have to worry about trade balances. And now I'm being asked to sort of do a kind of Stalin-like sort of forward 5-year plan or 10-year
Go on, get on with it.
Well, don't tempt me. The thing is, I actually think somewhere between the 5-year Stalin sort of 5-year plan and the total laissez-faire, there's something that's more sensible and reasonable. So I hope the farming roadmap, connected also to the Batters Review, will allow us to set a direction. It'll allow us to think about more strategically about the sectors that we want to support, also for our own resilience, but because there's export potential. And so we can move away from laissez-faire, but not quite as far as Stalinist 5-year plans.
Okay, I think
unless
I'd be glad
people
to
want
hear
me
that.
to do that, and I can go and ask, you know.
Yeah. Do we have any
The
questions
Prime
from
Minister.
the floor? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Minister, I think there is a part here that joining together the food strategy, the land use strategy,
Yep.
the Minette Batters farm profitability report,
Yep.
and the 25-year farm plan, those things you could move to a place where the confidence to invest
Yeah.
could suddenly change because there's a clear direction.
And I think that's we're
joining it
we're towards the end of publishing all of those, but I haven't published them yet. So we're in this funny sort of limbo when everyone's thinking what's going on. But I hope that very soon we'll be in a position to have much more clarity on that. But I wouldn't want it to be like a Stalinist 5-year plan. I'd want us to be able to change it as we go along, or maybe switch as circumstances change. So there has to be flexibility, but a basic understanding of direction is what I would like to see.
Minister, do you think there'll be some joining of the dots between those four? Because actually there's 4 really good reports there.
If you don't join the dots, it won't make any sense. So, I mean, I see these as all part of a structure of things coming together to try and get that direction in a context that we haven't seen happen in agriculture since the Second World War, I don't think.
Yep.
When my old Oxford College was apparently the centre of planning for growing enough potatoes.
Has to start somewhere.
See, farming heritage here. Yeah.
No, not really.
I think a lot of people will be really interested and positive, optimistic that you will be able to join those dots that you were talking about there. Is there a question from the floor? Oh, yes, we've got a question from the floor here. If you can say who you are and ask the question.
Andrew Meredith, the editor of Farmers Weekly. Minister, there's been a lot of soul searching since Labour came to power in the farming industry about whether the Labour Party and Labour MP specifically understand farming. You're 2 months into the job now. Do you think there is a knowledge gap on the backbenches, and what are the things that you've been sort of seeking to tell your friends and colleagues about now that you've joined the department?
I mean, I'm being pursued by Labour MPs who represent rural and farming interests, and now they represent the majority of rural and farming interests. There are more Labour MPs represent rural areas now than Tory MPs represent rural areas. That has only happened a couple of times in our history as a political party. I mean, 1945 being the other one. And so they pursue, they do not strike me as people who don't understand what the issues are in the communities they're representing, and they are organised. So I don't actually think that that's a true reflection of where we are in this Parliament.
Okay. I'll take this one question at the back. If you could keep it brief, that would be really wonderful, because we've got a lot of questions coming in on Slido as well. Gentleman at the back there. The roving mic is on its way. If you can say who you are first, that'd be
Thank you, Minister. Dave Walker. Just a question. You talk about maintaining production levels over the next 20 years. I was fortunate enough to be at the all-party parliamentary group meeting regarding 30-50-50 last week that talked about increasing production by 30% to meet the needs and the growth of the population in the UK. Do you feel there's a conflict between the policy you're setting, what they're striving to do, and the food security for the country, given the ongoing turmoil within the world for food production?
No, I don't think so. As I say, I think we're coming from a system where there was probably indifference as to how much food was going to be produced from the point of planning for it. It was just let the market decide, and when we were in the Common Agricultural Policy, the support mechanisms were all decided in the EU. So I think that we have made a decision that we've got to be more proactive about the direction that this is going to go in the next few years, for some of the reasons we've talked about, the uncertainties around climate change, the political uncertainties, the resilience that we are trying to inculcate. And so I think I'd like to be in a position to have a discussion about what percentage in a few years we might want to produce ourselves. And I don't think we've got the sinews in place to do that, except theoretically at the moment. So I want to grow the capacity to think in that way, to plan that way, which is what these reports are about. But then to start to deliver that practically and see what that means. So I actually think it's an evolutionary thing. And if we get it right, a future minister will be able to decide, perhaps down to the last 1%, how much we want to produce. But again, I think you need a little bit of leeway. You don't want to be so top-down that you end up with that Stalinist 5-year plan I was talking about earlier.
Minister, we've got a couple of questions. We've got a few questions coming in about UK food security. Do you consider the UK food supply to be secure? And what are the vulnerabilities, in your opinion? And what will government do? What is government going to do about it?
Well, there are all sorts of vulnerabilities. There are political vulnerabilities that we've talked about, have risen up the agenda with what's happening in Ukraine. That took out 20% of the world's grain supplies, which nobody was thinking would happen until it happened. So there are those political issues with potentially conflict and war. There are issues with disease. And we know that can suddenly happen. It can either be a COVID-style thing, which means that everything shuts down and then you've got to think about how to get hold of food, or it can be animal disease, like foot and mouth, or the prevalence and increasing sort of appearance of vector-borne diseases because of climate change, and a range of stuff like that. And
how confident are you that we have got food security in the UK? I mean, I know you've talked about some of the threats,
I think
how do you think we're doing?
I think we've got systems that can respond to emergencies, and having sat and done an emergency sort of operation in Cobra not long ago for the government to respond to another type of disease that appeared. We're doing one with AFA in DEFRA itself about animal disease as well. So I think that we're quite good at responding quickly. But obviously we need to look at resilience. We need to look at where our supply chains are particularly vulnerable and see what we can do to make sure that we don't fall into a position where our security could be easily compromised. There are also, and I haven't mentioned this, like hostile actors. If you look at what's been happening recently with cyber attacks and sabotage, we've also sadly got to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, so Terry Leahy, former CEO of Tesco, he called earlier this year for a food security strategy. I mean, wouldn't that be a great idea?
Let me get these strategies up and running first. I mean, I arrived at DEFRA and found out we had 8 strategies. I'm a chess player, normally you have 1 strategy. But anyway, there you are. Yes, obviously you have to have contingency plans, and you have to be aware of what your supply chains are, what the vulnerabilities are, to see what you can do to improve resilience.
Okay.
across the board.
We've got another question that's come in on Slido. What is the government's position on methane mitigation? Carrot or stick? What do you reckon? And how will they support the feed sector in dealing with misinformation in this area?
Well, okay, well, misinformation is an entire issue in itself, because there's an awful lot of ridiculous stuff goes on about whether it's feed or whether it's vaccinations or whether it's a range of other health issues. And I mean, I never thought as a politician that I would be having to deal with people who have trouble with the truth and think lizards run the world, or, you know, I've come across them, or, you know, Prime Minister's been thrown out of Buckingham Palace by the King because they'd seen an AI-generated version of it, and it was actually true. So we are in a bit of a dangerous position with that, and we've got to try to assert truth. What was the other bit of the question?
Well, the other bit
got me on misinformation.
The other bit, the first bit of the question was what's your position on methane mitigation? Are you going to enforce? You know, will you enforce? Is it carrot? Is it stick? What do you do?
I mean, clearly we've got to do something to mitigate the methane emissions that come from livestock, particularly cattle, and in order to do that, I know that there's different feeds that can deal with some of that. And I think that what we've got to do with stuff like this is to signal over time the direction we're going in, perhaps help people to start adopting that direction, and at the end, when it's cheaper and more available for everybody, potentially then regulate.
Okay.
But only at the very end.
Along the way, Minister, there'll be some public-facing messaging. Only Saturday, there was a story on Radio 6 Music about the end of a trial of Bovart with Arla.
Oh, that.
It creates a whole lot of noise and potential doubt amongst the consumer, when actually it's regulated by the FSA. It's approved in, I can't remember now, 26 countries around the world. It's not just here in the UK that's signed it off.
There are sadly some MPs that pursue that sort of misinformation as well. And all we can do is you know, put out the truth and use our standards to basically say this feed isn't a problem.
It's safe.
It's safe.
Okay, we're going to take another question from the floor. We've got the lady in the middle here. Please, can you say who you are?
Thank you. Diana Overton, Frontier Agriculture. You mentioned in reviewing the existing SFI schemes that you're looking to simplify and focus before providing an update. Is there recognition that the schemes that we've had thus far, have to a certain extent limited the opportunity to grow our industry, grow arable production in particular, where, for example, it's been a choice about biodiversity or environmental schemes at times at the cost of arable production?
Yes, if you're going to have wildflowers round a field, you're not going to be able to produce quite as much from that field as you did before, but you will get a benefit in terms of insect life and wildlife and do things more sustainably. But yes, obviously, there is that trade-off.
I mean, so the concern will be that in the last couple of years, we've had instances where farmers have been, there were blocks put in place by the last government, but there was an ability to put 80% of your land or more into options, which took it out of production.
And I'm thinking in particular, the part that our industry needs to play in terms of the growth agenda has actually been limited quite significantly over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Opportunity, Minister.
I mean, yes. I think also there has to be a recognition that quite a lot of these funds are committed over multiple years going forwards. So you can't suddenly change them. And that's a legacy of what was inherited from the previous government. So I'm looking to see what I can do within the structures that we've got with the money we've got.
Okay.
And that's mysterious, but that's what it's going to be.
We are pushed for time. I know. We are pushed for time because I know that you have got a train that you need to leap on at some point very soon.
Step carefully, probably. But
No. Leap. Leap forward. I'd like to finish with the question that's come in on Slido, which I think is a really interesting. What do you see as the industry's key role in your vision?
Well, I think feeding us and making sure that the 70% of land that is looked after by people who are in the agricultural sector, rural sector, is properly shepherded for all the reasons we want, not only for nature but for food, for clean water. I think that's important. But obviously, production and profitability in a balanced, sustainable way is what we're aiming for.
Okay, and government is going to support the agricultural industry and the agricultural supplies industry to achieve that.
Of course, but within the boundaries of the money that we've got, I have to say, because you could spend an awful lot more and you could spend an awful lot less. So we've got to do things with the money we've got because the CSR has happened, the comprehensive spending review, so we know what our budgets are for the next 3 years.
Okay, we could ask questions for a long, long time. We have loads here, but I know that you've got to get off and we have got other contributors to hear from today. Dame Angela Eagle, we really value your time and we'd like to thank you very much for coming along and sharing your thoughts at this conference today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are looking at agriculture in the devolved nations. Let us head north of the border, and I would like to introduce George Burgess. Now, George is heading towards the podium now. He is Director of Agriculture and Rural Economy at the Scottish Government. It's a role he's held since 2022, which sets him really at the very heart of policy delivery, with responsibilities ranging from supporting Scotland in being a global leader in sustainable and regen agriculture, meeting net zero targets, and maximising the potential of Scotland's food and drink sector. George, great to have you here. Please talk to us.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be back here once again with you. Those that were in the audience this time last year might remember me making some slightly disparaging remarks about AIC's man in Scotland, Ian, who was about to depart AIC and come and join the Scottish Government as Special Advisor to the First Minister. And so you'll be pleased to hear that Ian has had the best part of the last year to get his revenge on me for those remarks. It's good, however, to have in the room today AIC's man in Scotland, Ian. Different Ian. Robert doesn't go in too much for big changes. We can be sure, though, that Ian McDougall, who's at the back there, will be following in his predecessor's footsteps and maintaining the very good and constructive link between the AIC and your sectors and the Scottish Government. So in Scotland, we have a vision for agriculture, one that sets out our ambition of transforming how we support farming and food production to become a global leader in sustainable and regenerative agriculture. We say plainly that there is no contradiction between farming in ways that are beneficial for nature recovery, soil health, for climate adaptation and mitigation, and the production of high quality food. Our producers are at the very heart of our vision, just as they are at the heart of our rural communities and rural economy. And our approach is to work with our industry and rural partners to deliver together. Last year, doing this, we delivered the Agriculture and Rural Communities Act that placed these core principles into law as the very objectives of our agriculture policy. And right now, we're continuing to work with partners to adapt and change our support structures to realise that vision. We recognise that primary food production in a high-income economy like the UK can be a very marginal endeavour, subject to fluctuating input costs and market drivers, beyond the control of farmers and crofters, and frankly, beyond the control of government in many cases. So that's why we have committed in Scotland to continuing with direct payments for our producers, and we have set out that 70% of future funding will be delivered in that way as we transition our support systems. Of course, it's right that we do ask more of our farmers and crofters and reward them for and incentivise them towards sustainable and regenerative practice, just as it's right to ensure We provide direct investment into the business resilience of our producers, investment that in turn serves to underpin food production and creates huge benefits for our rural communities and anchors our world-class food and drinks industries. So our producers are already starting to undertake baselines on soil, nature, climate and efficiency as a base expectation of the support for the direct payments. The whole farm plan measure that we've introduced supports producers to better know what is right for their businesses and to make choices that are beneficial to the outcomes shared by them and government. The same principles apply, for example, to changes we've made to our suckler beef support model in Scotland, with a tightening of calving intervals, again recognising efficiencies in production. From next year, there'll be further expectations so that those seeking reward from the public funds will need to manage more land in a way that protects nature and is good for climate outcomes. All these approaches seek to reward our producers for their part in helping to feed our nation and for doing so in ways that work for the farmer, for nature and for the climate. That ensures a thriving primary production sector that in turn enables thriving rural communities and underpins, as I've said, our rural economy and food and drink sectors. So I want now to touch on a couple of aspects of our policy that I think might be of particular interest to this audience. One of the tools we have to support farmers is to innovate. Support them to innovate is targeted financial assistance. This summer, we launched our £14 million Future Farming Investment Scheme, which provides upfront payments of up to £20,000 at a 100% grant rate. And this has given farmers the flexibility to choose the most appropriate capital investments for their businesses. Now, we made the scheme dead simple, just about as simple as we possibly could, and the response to the scheme was outstanding, with over 7,500 applications. Last month, we were able to announce a substantial uplift, increasing the total funding from 14 million to over 21 million. And we believe that this will lever in a further 10 million in investment. Now, the significant financial boost reflects a serious commitment to advancing innovation and resilience across Scotland's farming and food sectors. And for the equipment manufacturers in the room, I'm sure it will have come as a welcome bonus for you too. We also announced last month the opening of the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, AIC, in early 2026, and that funding for this scheme will be maintained until at least 2030. Again, helping to ensure stability and enabling businesses to plan ahead and support on-farm investment in nature and climate-friendly farming. So from precision grazing to adapting to climate change, from managing flood risks to small-scale tree planting, AIC is a valuable part of our vision for sustainable, resilient Scottish agriculture. And following awards from the latest round, our government will have committed 339 million to nearly 3,500 businesses since the scheme was brought into being. Over the last 2 years, our government has allocated 6 million of support to the valuable fruit and vegetable sector in Scotland. The importance of that sector has already been mentioned today. And in February, we announced the continuation in Scotland of the Fruit and Vegetable Aid Scheme from next year. Specifically, this support is helping producers to adopt smarter growing systems, invest in low-carbon technologies, and use data to drive better yields and reduce waste. We recognise that this sector has been hard hit of late, from labour problems exacerbated by Brexit to increased costs, as you've heard from Ali, for inputs such as energy. And even in Scotland, water scarcity. Continued investment in the scheme is helping Scottish growers to remain committed to growing food and supporting our domestic production. Now, our vision for agriculture must be grounded in science and driven by innovation. Last year, we invested 17 million in the Crop Innovation Centre at the James Hutton Institute and their International Barley Hub, which was created in partnership with the University of Dundee. So these are two cutting-edge facilities driving climate-resilient crops, better yields and stronger disease resistance. And through our Knowledge Transfer and Innovation Fund, we're providing a further 2 million to the Monitor Farm programme. The 9 participating farms in that scheme have been a driving force for innovation, collaboration and knowledge sharing that actually affect a much wider cohort of farms. So over the last 10 years, we've supported 60 KITIF projects in total. And we're also supporting the continued delivery and development of the My Herd Stats platform available via Scott EID. And the ongoing support reflects our clear commitment to backing livestock farmers with science-led digital tools that drive production, efficiency and boost profitability. We're investing £3 million in a national LiDAR scan using laser technology to create a highly detailed 3D map of our country. This innovative project will be completed in 2027. Already over 10% of the Scottish landmass has been scanned, but we don't need to wait until 2027 to get the benefits. From next month, the mapped data will be made available publicly, opening up new possibilities for research, planning, and precision agriculture innovation. We also believe that our land and natural capital it supports is one of our most valuable assets, vital to our national prosperity and to our well-being as individuals and communities. Scotland is a small country with a limited amount of land, yet we rely on it for so much. Through our third land use strategy, we reset our focus onto the integrated nature of land use, showcasing the range of demands and benefits we get from our land. We've just consulted on Scotland's fourth land use strategy as we look to further our understanding and approach to land use integration, and that strategy is set to be published by March. Given the mention of land use strategy for England, I would say there has been quite a bit of interaction between my teams and colleagues in DEFRA, as DEFRA have been looking to develop their strategy. Now, we spoke last year at this event about the prospects for an SPS agreement between the UK and EU. It's been mentioned already several times this morning. We now have the high-level agreement set out in the Common Understanding reached in May, based on dynamic alignment of rules and standards, and negotiation is set to begin in earnest on the details, and we could well see the full agreement reached by early next year. I'm perhaps a little more optimistic than our speaker earlier on that. There will be a lot of work to implement the agreement as we play catch-up on 6 years of European policy development. Now, I'm sorry that Dame Angela is not in the room, because I'm going to say something nice about DEFRA, not always something that you associate with the Scottish Government, but credit where it is due, DEFRA are putting in the effort and resource to ensure the negotiations and the implementation are a success. And we in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland are playing our part in that process too. But it would be naive to think that this will just be like turning the clock back to 2019 or whenever, to the pre-Brexit days when trade with Europe was simple. There will be big changes, not just for the importers and exporters directly affected by the Brexit changes, but for all our domestic businesses. And I think we will need your help as individual businesses and with the AIC to support agribusinesses through this process. Farming is an uncertain business. From the vagaries of the weather to the vagaries of the market, a lot is up in the air. And even those two great certainties of life, death and taxes, have had additional uncertainty over the last year, and we all wait to see whether the Chancellor has had a change of heart. So support for the health and well-being of our industry is vital. We're determined to do all we can in government to assist programmes which provide frontline support. So in addition to the funding we already provide to RSABI, so the sister organisation of RABI, we've recently awarded £25,000 to Farm Strong Scotland to support their social wellbeing project. This funding supports a dedicated engagement lead and a powerful programme of events across Scotland, giving farmers and crofters the space to connect, share and support one another. So just to summarise, the Scottish Government is committed to supporting the sector now and in the future. In an increasingly uncertain world, we believe we have delivered stability and certainty and will continue to do so as we develop our future support systems with the sector. With this vision of agriculture, we're confident that Scottish agriculture will continue to lead the way, feeding our nation with high-quality food and delivering for climate change and nature. The aim is for Scotland to be a resilient, sustainable rural economy and one that we can be proud of for decades to come. Thank you.
George, thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to take some questions for you in a brief period of time, just a moment. I just want to make sure we get to Wales. And we fit Wales in because we're going to head to Wales next. We'll take questions for George shortly. There are some coming in on Slido already. Type it into Slido. I will put your questions to George in a short while. But I mean, first of all, we did want to go to Wales. We invited Huw Irranca-Davies, who is the Cabinet Secretary for Climate Change and Rural Affairs in the Senate, to come and join us. He's also the Deputy First Minister of Wales, as you know. Unfortunately, he couldn't come today, but he has sent us this video.
Bore da, good morning to you all. I hope the conference is going well so far, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm glad to be able to join you virtually. Just want to turn our attention to what the new global norms look like. Those new global norms are disruptive rather than reliable. Farmers across the UK, just to put some detail on this, and certainly across Wales, have struggled through an incredibly dry summer. Many are now going to be anxious about having enough winter feed because of that. Last year, we had the polar opposite with some of the wettest weather that we've seen. And as we're all now becoming aware increasingly, this is just part of a wider pattern of unreliable seasons. And it's farmers who are right at the forefront of dealing with these impacts, with the impacts of climate change. But our other ongoing norm is the expectation that we will have world-class food produced on Welsh farms by hard-working, committed Welsh farmers. So it's a real priority for me to link these aspects up, to support the ongoing production of safe, high-quality food, but in the context of the climate and nature emergency which is pressing upon us. Now, we've got to be honest in these discussions. There are increasingly, unfortunately, people who want to simply deny the climate reality that we are seeing around us and living in our daily lives. But, you know, I want to be crystal clear on this. Denying reality is not what leadership is about. It is not going to help our farmers. So I'm determined to tackle these issues head on and to support farmers to thrive in the changing conditions. Now, these challenges are reflected in our Agriculture Wales Act, which became law in 2023. And these are the principles upon which our sustainable farming scheme has been designed. After several years of consulting and collaborating on this work, our sustainable farming scheme will commence on the 1st of January 2026. And the SFS is, of course, a whole farm scheme. It's designed to support farm businesses, family farm businesses, and to support them economically and environmentally and socially, to foster sustainability in the round and to help them become more resilient to the impacts of environmental and market change as well. The SFS comprises a number of universal actions, some of which will be of particular interest to AIC members. We have, for example, a universal action on soil testing. We know that everything begins with our precious soils. So supporting our farmers to make informed and data-driven choices on their soil management underpins so many of our objectives around food production, carbon, and biodiversity. We've also included integrated pest management, not to ban chemical use, but to try and ensure that chemical use is as targeted as possible to improve efficiency on the farm, to reduce wider environmental impacts, and to reduce the risk of pesticide resistance as well. And we have a universal action on benchmarking. This is designed to support farmers to monitor performance across different aspects of their business, which might lead to changes around pasture management or crop rotations, the use of inputs or animal feed. And we've also included an action on proactive animal health and welfare, to develop and maintain our high standards, and to support sustainable and profitable production. This is in the context, of course, of emerging disease threats, which can have severe impacts. Within our biodiversity-focused actions, there will be a requirement for some farmers to create new areas of temporary habitat, such as mixed herbal lays. So even here, we have cross-cutting opportunities to benefit pasture management and pollinating insects at the same time. Now, these actions are designed to benefit food production and resilient farm businesses and the environment that they operate within. Many farmers are already taking these actions, and we need to recognise and reward this. But many farmers are not, and it's a priority for me to embed these actions across the industry as standard best practice. And as thousands of Welsh farm businesses become more resilient to external forces, they also become better able to make the most of the potential opportunities. So the optional and the collaborative elements for those farmers who wish to go even further to improve their productivity or the positive impact they make on their environment. Our analysis is very clear. It's in these layers are where many of the wider benefits for businesses and for the environment lie. And as individual farm businesses become more sustainable, those benefits are multiplied across the industry and across the country. They ultimately benefit the whole agri-food supply chain. By making the whole agri-food supply chain more resilient and sustainable, we are meeting the demands of consumers who want to understand where their food is coming from. And the Sustainable Farming Scheme, of course, does not exist in isolation. It has very strong links with our other programmes that support the wider food industry across Wales, as well as community food initiatives and increasing the amount of Welsh produce consumed by the public sector across Wales. Now, we know this will mean change for some farmers. So it is also a priority for me to support farmers through this change so that we're all able to pull together and offer consistent and constructive advice and support to our farmers. So we've worked in partnership with a range of stakeholders to reach this final scheme, and my team have really benefited from helpful discussions with AIC Cymru over the past few years. I really hope we can continue to build on these relationships to give our farmers the support they need as they navigate this transition and enjoy a prosperous and resilient industry. Away from the SFS, other priorities include my commitment to working with the other governments of the UK to explore a harmonised regulatory framework for placing fertilising products on the market across the UK, and also to work with the UK government to ensure that the interests of Welsh producers are included in forthcoming negotiations for the UK-EU sanitary and phytosanitary agreements. I know both of these issues will be of great interest to you all. So there's a lot here to keep us busy. And my apologies again, I can't be there with you in person to discuss these important matters. But I really wish you well with the rest of the conference, and many thanks to you all. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Huw Irranca-Davies. Would have been great to have had him here in person, but it was good that he was represented, and it was good that he took the time to make that video for us. Obviously, we can't ask him questions, but we can ask George Burgess questions from the Scottish Government. George, first of all, do submit on Slido. We've got quite a few coming in already. If you want to ask one in person, put your hand up, wave. We will get the roving mic to you as soon as possible. Okay, I want to ask you a question, first of all, that's come in on Slido, George. How likely is Scotland to adopt a progressive approach to precision-bred crops?
I think that's one of the questions that I anticipated coming up today.
It's not the only one.
It's not the only one.
No,
I'm sure it isn't. So this might actually answer several of them. The Scottish Government has been cautious about gene editing, precision breeding, new genomic techniques, whatever you want to call it, not because of some distrust of the science. Indeed, some of the leading science in this area is taking place north of the border. our concern is much more about the potential for trade barriers to be created. So we were concerned when, in our view, UK government rushed ahead to put in place the Precision Breeding Act because we saw the potential for that to create another trade barrier between GB and Europe. Now, obviously, the EU has been taking its own steps on new genomic techniques, not quite across the line yet, but getting that way. So our overall approach in the Scottish Government is to maintain alignment with Europe. So I think this is an area where once Europe has settled what it's going to do, then we would be looking to fall in line with that. And indeed, the SPS agreement we've talked about today is very likely to drive all of us in Scotland, England, and Wales into doing just that.
Okay, do we have any questions from the floor? Just because I'd like to take one if we do. If not, I have plenty on Slido, so we'll go to another one of those. Let me go to this one first. Given the current challenges facing the whisky sector with significantly reduced demand, are there plans to provide growers with further immediate support?
There was a question in the Scottish Parliament just the other week as to what was the Scottish Government doing to support the malting barley sector. The Minister and I were tempted to answer, we're drinking as fast as we possibly can, but even our contribution to that would be a modest one. Yeah, we absolutely recognise the challenges that the whisky sector is facing, and that's down to the theme of today's conference, global uncertainty, be it tariffs, be it general economic issues around the globe, and that is feeding back to domestic agriculture in Scotland. The market for malting barley is definitely well back, so there are many farmers that are feeling the pinch for that. No, there are no plans at the moment for immediate direct support in that area, but we are looking to do what can we do to help support the whisky industry itself in this, and issues like the barley hub that I mentioned that we've invested in will help not this year but for the future.
Would you be open to dialogue about it, about some sort of support?
Yes, we would. To be honest, I don't think that we have had any approach looking for support. Famous last words. I'm sure lunchtime will be very busy.
I was going to say that was an enormous question.
We'll
Get
invite
in
that
there at
contribution.
lunchtime.
There's also the challenge, I guess, George, of how that sits with conversations that your First Minister is having with the President of the United States, conversations that are taking place in India. So it's quite a complicated picture of where do you make that. I can see the intervention that delivers the right outcome for a sustainable business. And that I think we'd be happy to try and work with you to find a solution to that. I think we would accept it's quite challenging.
Yeah. Another question we have on Slido. The Scottish Climate Change Action Plan considers knowledge exchange via a new ag knowledge and innovation system. I'm sure that is of interest to a lot of people here today. What role can the agri-supply sector play in that?
Okay, so I talked a little bit about CATIF, which is the existing scheme that we have, including monitor farm. Yes, that is transitioning across into the new ACIS. We do like 4-letter acronyms, and yeah, I think that the sector can play an important role. I mean, who do the farmers want to listen to? It's not people like me, frankly. What they want to hear from are other farmers and from their trusted advisors. And many of you in the room will be in that position of trust. So I think there is an important role that you and AIC can play in helping to get that best of knowledge down from academia and the top levels of what's being developed to the ground level.
Okay, whenever we talk about salmon production on Farming Today, it's quite a controversial subject. As Scotland's biggest food export, is salmon. Do you support the continued growth of this sector?
Yes, the Scottish Government does support the growth of that sector. It is, as you say, a very important sector for Scotland. I think the UK's largest food export, second only to the UK's largest drink export, which is also ours. I know there are a number of anglers in the room as well, and that there are long-standing issues between wild and farmed salmon. So yes, there is support for the growth of the sector. How the sector will grow, and speaking to someone earlier this morning, I think we will see more of the aquaculture, the farming cages probably moving further offshore. Now that requires significant engineering, again something that your members might be well skilled in. But we do need to look at those interactions with wild populations as well, and make sure that Scottish salmon is being sold for its clean green credentials. We need to make sure that those are actually backed up by the reality.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from the floor? We have a lady right at the very back. I wonder if we can get our roving mic to her, not our rolling mic.
Thank you very much. My name is Olivia Cox. I work for Elsom Seeds. We're a breeder. My question is regarding the LiDAR scheme which you're talking about. I think it's a really interesting technology. And I'd just like to know, how do you see yourself leveraging that technology between government and industry? I think there's a lot of potential there. Us as breeders could really do well with that information.
Yeah. Scotland is actually playing catch up on this, frankly. Our colleagues in Northern Ireland are ahead of us in terms of doing LiDAR scans and then looking to make the information from that available. Now, I said we don't want it to be just, great, we've done the LiDAR scan, only government or academia can use it. So the trick is to make sure that we get the right way to convert the data, the raw data, into something that farmers can use themselves. Now, I'm sorry to give a plug for another conference, but some of you might be at AgriScot next week in Edinburgh, and at that conference, our colleagues that are leading on the work online have a seminar where they will be setting out some of the early opportunities that we've got to turn the data into something that is actually directly useful for farmers and growers, and also to hear from them, okay, what are the other areas that they would like to see developed?
Okay, we've probably got time for another couple of questions. So I've got a few on here. What role is there, George, for the Scottish Government in helping broaden cropping diversity in Scotland beyond just wheat and barley?
Right, okay. This has been a week for me attending conferences. Yesterday it was with the Food and Agriculture Organisation in a very damp Glasgow, but Monday I was on hemp. Not smoking it, but looking at the potential for this crop. Now, we've grown hemp for, well, probably thousands of years, when we've sort of got out of the habit of it a bit. But real potential, whether that's work that the Rowett Institute in Aberdeen has been doing on the quality of the oil that you can get from the hemp seeds, the flour that can be produced from it. Now, I would not recommend necessarily trying their hemp pancakes. They're a little bit of an acquired taste, but real benefits of getting those oils into sort of bake and the flour into baked goods. They've done some work with one of the egg producers, and now I'm going to get my omegas the wrong way round, but hens fed on hemp oil in the mix, a huge increase in health benefit in the eggs that are produced. So there are potential like that. There's potential for the fibres to be used in many different ways, including for insulation. So our discussion on Monday was, okay, great, we've got all this potential, so what? What do we do about it? How do we what does government do to support it? How does that fit with existing cropping? We've heard already that malting barley certainly this year has not been great. There will be arable farmers looking at other opportunities. So I'm not sure quite what the answer is yet, but certainly, we are open to exploring things like that about, are there new crops or indeed some old crops like hemp that we can return to and find new uses from.
Okay, there's an entertaining question here. Is hemp habit forming? It's just come on, but...
I understand that, the amount of the industrial hemp that you would have to smoke to have even the slightest effect would be, beyond, and I think anyone's capability. It's a sector. It's still regulated by the Home Office, which is one of the barriers to it. But no, I don't think anyone is going to be going into the field and having a happy time.
George, thank you. So I suspect that's beyond your knowledge reservoir, isn't it? Anyway, but I don't know. I don't know. What I would like to do though is to thank you so much for your time today and for coming to join us here at this conference amongst your busy conference schedule that you obviously have. Thank you very much indeed to George Burgess from the Scottish Government. Okay, but if you would like to, we're going to have another Slido poll. So grab your phone or device or laptop or whatever it is that you use. It'll be quite interesting to see where opinion falls on the back of everything we've heard over the last hour. Our question, I think it's up on the screen now, is: does the industry believe that the political agenda for agriculture over the next 18 months will support the agri-food sector? What do you think? How much confidence do we have in the room today? We are on mild, aren't we? These surveys always come out with mildly agree or disagree, don't they? But yeah, interesting. Mildly disagreeing. So there's not a lot who mildly agree, and there are very, very few who strongly agree. So yeah, there we go. Read into that what we will. Brilliant. Okay, moving on now. We've got two really interesting speakers who are looking forward to future developments and opportunities in the industry to hear from before we break for lunch in about 45 minutes. I would like to invite Dr. Elliott Grant to the stage. Elliott is a visiting fellow at the University of Cambridge, their Institute for Manufacturing, and also Kelly Hewson-Fisher, who is Director and Head of Rural Research for the Property and Land Agents. Savills, do join us. Now, Kelly, if you want to have a seat, we're going to talk. First of all, we're going to hear from Elliott. If you have ever found yourself wondering how big a role AI has to play in the farming industry and the future of the farming industry, Dr. Elliott Grant is really the man to answer that question. Way back in 2017, he joined Google X to lead their development of foundational AI for agriculture. It was happening back then. And he's currently a visiting fellow at Trinity College, Cambridge, where he's researching the future role of AI in agriculture. Dr. Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. Please take the podium.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, thank you for that. Well, I was told when I was coming up here, because I just moved back from Silicon Valley after 25 years, that I should be wearing shorts and flip-flops to let you know where I was coming from, but the weather really wasn't up to it, so I decided not to wear a tie instead. The other thing I can tell coming from Silicon Valley, that we're not in Silicon Valley right now, is I've been here about 3.5 hours and nobody has talked about AI yet. So clearly this is a good opportunity for me to share with you my research on AI and the future of agriculture, and I do believe it will be profound. I really appreciate the opportunity from the AIC to come and talk to you all, because I do believe that as thought leaders, as policymakers, as decision makers in this industry, it's really important for you to have a perspective on the future. Now, I'm going to try to look very far into the future, perhaps. Now, there's the clicker going again. Let's see, here we go. I'll just press it very hard. My research at Cambridge is looking 10 or 20 years into the future and the role of AI on the future of agri-food systems. And obviously, it's impossible to look that far ahead, but I plan to sort of try to take you out of the today view of AI, the chatbots and the image generators, to where I actually think we're going. And I'm going to be intentionally provocative and a little controversial, because I think it's important for you to have a perspective on what I think is coming. So just a quick, why me, why am I up here? As you heard, I've spent the last 7 years at Google running their AI for Agriculture initiative called Mineral. I ran a couple of different agri-food companies in Silicon Valley in traceability and in personalized nutrition, so it's been a long-term passion of mine, and I still serve on a couple of boards in genetics, for example. But I came back to the UK, partly for political reasons, but partly because I really believe in the opportunity for the UK to be a world leader in AI and agriculture, and I'd love to see that come to fruition. So before I look forward, let me look back for a moment. Let's look back 125 years at some of the biggest, most transformational innovations that have really created this industry. And I've just listed a few of them here, but these are discoveries. These were discoveries by brilliant people like Fritz Haber, fixed nitrogen, or Jen Doudna, CRISPR, that have transformed the industry. So, observation number one, these are discoveries of things in nature which have transformed agriculture, and I'll come back to that thought at the end. The second observation is the adoption curve of these technologies. Typically, they start off with a few early adopters trying them out, then those early adopters get some huge benefit, and before long, we hit the S-curve, and you simply cannot be in business if you're not using these technologies. And I think, I hear often the pundits talk about AI as like, well, it's a fad, or it's just a gimmick, or it's just a parroting, it's learned behaviors. But I would argue, no, that we are actually just at the beginning of this S-curve, and watch this space. Things are about to get very interesting indeed. So that was looking back. Now I'm going to look forward, and I'm going to try, in the short amount of time we have, is to give you a framework of thinking about how AI will transform and impact the food system. And I'm going to break it down into 5 disruptions that I see coming, with increasing levels of impact and decreasing levels of certainty. And I'll start with the first one, and now each of these will be a provocative statement, that within the next 10 years or so, basically, data collection will become free. Very much of data collection in agriculture today is human perception. Think about observing weeds or pest pressure or running a field trial or looking at crop health. These are things that we have developed that's human skilled. And what you see in this picture on the left here are some robots that my team at Google built years ago, about 5 years ago, that can go into a field and image every single plant and extract 20 different traits from those plants faster, more accurately, more consistently, than humans possibly can. And so I think it's game over for humans in terms of this kind of data collection, and the technology is only getting better. And it's not just visual perception. These machines can look in other wavelengths. They can see things humans can't see. It's also not just this close-up view. As we heard from the previous talk about LiDAR detecting, we have remote sensing. We can use satellite imagery, it's work we did at Google, to extract field boundaries, crop types, cropping practices. We can even tell what variety of seed is being grown in a field, believe it or not. So it's possible now to extract an enormous amount of information at practically zero cost. So that is step number one, that's disruption number one. But what happens with all this data is it's used to train AI models. So that's disruption number two, which is a transformation of knowledge. So today, if you're an agronomist, knowing something like what kind of what sort of seed variety should I use, or what nematode treatment should I use, or when should I harvest, these things are valuable. You, as an agronomist, you're going to be paid for this service by a farmer. And I'm going to argue that that kind of knowledge is going to become a commodity very quickly. And I'll use an example of this chap. This is Mr. Lee Sedol. Some of you may recognize him. He was, or still is, I think, the world #1 Go player. Now, Go is an ancient Chinese strategy game like chess, been played by millions of people for over 2,000 years. And for a long time, it was considered the most difficult game for computers to play, far beyond the ability for computers to play out every move. There are more moves in Go than there are atoms in the observable universe, which is a very big number. And so we didn't have the ability to play Go like we played chess. And in 2016, a little company called DeepMind in London came up with a different approach to playing Go. They, instead of teaching it all the ways that humans could play Go, which is how we used to teach chess computers, they taught a little program how to play Go, and then they let it play itself. It's called reinforcement learning. And this little software program played itself about 1 billion times. And over that 1 billion times of playing itself, it learned new strategies of how to play Go. It learned the knowledge of Go playing. Now, this was 2017, so it's about 10 years ago, and Mr. Lee Sedol was challenged to a match against DeepMind, and Lee Sedol, world #1 Go player, was very confident. There's no way that a computer program can have the subtlety and intuition and knowledge of something as complicated as Go. Well, I think you can tell from this photo, it didn't exactly go the way Mr. Lee was expecting. DeepMind's software thrashed him 4 games to 1. And it was a watershed moment for AI because for the first time we saw that not only could it play a sophisticated game, it created new knowledge. There was a famous move called Move 37 in Game 2, where the software played a move so elegant, so advanced, that the commentators were like awestruck, that this computer program had created new ways of playing. And now you'd be crazy to go into a cash competition in Go against a computer. You would definitely lose. So my point of sort of belaboring this is that was only 10 years ago. And if I'm looking 10 years into the future, and if you're sitting there going, there's no way the computer could possibly know what my agronomists know, it's far too subtle and simple or so elegant, I would just remind you of Mr. Lee Sedol. So transformation number 2 is I believe that knowledge as a commodity will become commodified. And the only way to compete and remain a competitive advantage is to have unique knowledge, unique data that no one else has. And that's going to become increasingly difficult. If you've tried anything with Claude recently, type in a hard agronomy question, I think it'll do a pretty good job. Okay, so knowledge is interesting, but so what? What knowledge leads to is decisions. So the next transformation is going to be decision support. Now, when I came here yesterday, last night, of course, like many of you, I just turned on Google Maps, I plugged in the address, and I followed its direction. I was effectively using an AI agent to make decisions for me. What route to take, go left or right, how long it was going to take, and it works fantastic. Now, of course, if it disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't be able to get home, right? I've lost this sort of intuition and ability to sort of navigate, having used and relied on it for 10 years. And there's something, I think, really important about that, because I think decision-making will be outsourced increasingly to agents. We will basically just delegate some of this more routine decision-making, like we do to Google Maps, to AI agents for things like decision-making on the farm, or decision-making for the consumer in the grocery store. What should I buy? Is it healthy? Is it sustainable? Currently, the decisions are mitigated or mediated by labels. It's kind of a crazy way to make decisions. I think we'll just outsource this to AI agents. And there's another very important thing to know about Google Maps, which you may not realize. And having been at Google, I can tell you this is true. The map is not optimizing just for you. It's not creating a local optimum. It's creating a global optimum. What that means is it's actually looking at all the other people using Google Maps who are driving on the same route, and it's deciding should you go left or should you go right to actually optimize the routes for everybody. And that's really important. These AI agents will negotiate with one another. So they'll take the humans out of the loop. The agronomy AI agent will negotiate with the seed company's AI agent, maybe have a chat to the DEFRA AI agent, and together come up with an optimum solution that then hands it back to you. Google made an announcement a couple of weeks ago that created a language for AI agents to talk to one another without including us, so this is definitely coming. Okay, well, okay, I've made a decision. What's the next logical step? It's decision into action. So let's talk about AI and taking action, which in many ways, when we think about AI on the farm, this is the first thing people think of. Well, it's a self-driving tractor, or it's a robot doing something. And I would argue then, yes, that is absolutely going to happen. Self-driving tractors are already roving around everywhere, certainly in America. Self-flying drones. In the US, in horticulture, we have a lot of autonomous little vehicles that are moving materials around, mowing, spraying. This is very logical, right? These are tasks that are either boring or tedious or maybe unsafe if they're spraying chemicals, really well suited to give to a little machine, a robot that can use AI to navigate its way around the field. And this is growing well. But I would actually make a slightly controversial statement that humans are not going to be replaced entirely by robots on the farm. And this is the comparative advantage of humans. Things that humans can do are actually very hard for robots to do, and vice versa. It's called Moravec's paradox, if you want to look it up. Basically, robots can do some things incredibly well, but are incredibly bad at doing what we consider to be very simple. And I would argue something like picking soft fruit is a perfect example. If you had a robot that was as good as a human at picking fruit, it would be so good it should probably be doing brain surgery instead. And that's the comparative advantage of robots. So I think in the next 10 or 20 years, we won't see the elimination of labor on the farm. Just like I've shown in this AI-generated image, we will see the augmentation of human labor on the farm. Make the job more attractive, less onerous, more productive for the humans, and it's a win-win. Okay, so I've taken you through information will be free, knowledge will be a commodity, we will outsource our decision-making, and robots are going to do most of the work. Well, what is left for us? Well, there is the fifth dimension of the impact of AI, and that brings me back to that very first slide on the 125 years of innovation that we've seen of discoveries. So I'm actually very optimistic about AI, if you couldn't tell, but I actually think that the next 10 years will see as much dramatic innovation as we saw in the last 125. Because many of those problems that were resolved, like the discovery of fixed nitrogen, can be accelerated by using AI as a co-researcher. And I draw your attention to this thing on the left-hand side. So colleagues of mine at Google X, taught a piece of software how to design silicon chips for photonics. Doesn't matter what the detail is. Basically, it's a chip that can split a laser beam into its different wavelengths. And this is the chip that historically is designed by very talented engineers. And they said, well, let's get an AI to do that job. And there were three very interesting things we learned. One is it worked. Software could develop its own semiconductor that could be manufactured, and it worked really well. Number two, the chip is 100 times smaller than the one designed by the human, so it's much more efficient, it's much cheaper. And number three is we have no idea why it works. Like, we look at this and we're like, no human software or programmer or physicist can explain why that works so well. So we have crossed the Rubicon. We have entered a world where AI can do things that it cannot explain to us, mere humans, what it is doing. Now that's a little hard to grasp, but that is exactly where we are. It's as if we showed up in Nevada, and indeed there's Area 51, and we cracked open the chip, and it looked like this. And we don't know why it works. Personally, I think we just have to embrace that and get on with it. But it means that we have the potential now, this superpower that is getting better, doubling or tripling in power every year, to do things like accelerate genomic prediction, accelerate the discovery of plant genomes, or do synthetic biology to solve some of these huge problems we've talked about: water scarcity, pest pressure, utilization of fertilizer, all the challenges that we are talking about. I'm not going to say they're going to be solved tomorrow, but we have a superpower waiting to help us accelerate. And I very much hope that the UK will embrace our leadership in AI. I mean, DeepMind came out of London and is still there, to be a world leader in some of these opportunities. So I leave you with a couple of takeaways from this. I know I went very quickly. It's a much longer presentation normally, but I wanted to sort of shotgun it to you. That I'm very optimistic that AI will both transform, augment, or replace many of the jobs we do today. If you're sitting here going, oh my gosh, what is our competitive advantage if AI will do it all and it'll be freely available? I think that's the right question to be asking yourselves. And I think the one thing in agriculture in particular that remains very hard to replicate is data. So if you, in your farm or farms or your research labs, the data you produce is going to become the source of your competitive advantage, which feeds your models, which feeds your AI agents. And I think that's very important to focus on. I often say that the best time to collect data in agriculture is 10 years ago. And the second best time is to start like right now. The third point is I'm very optimistic about AI's power to accelerate discovery. I think we will miss the train as the UK industry if we don't get on it right now. Because believe me, everyone else in the world is doing this. And then the fourth point, which I didn't have time to really get into, is like all those other innovations I showed you at the beginning, there will be unintended consequences of implementing such a powerful technology. And it behooves us as industry leaders and policymakers and academics to try to anticipate as best we can the consequences of injecting AI into such a complicated and existential system. And with that, I really thank you for your time, and I look forward to some questions.
Elliott,
press it pretty hard.
thank you so much for that. Absolutely fascinating. I mean, I think there's no doubt that AI is going to be a huge, huge, influence and controlling factor in what we'll do in the future. I mean, if you've got questions for Elliott, hang on for 20 minutes if you want to ask them in person and wave at me. Put them on Slido otherwise, because we are going to hear, first of all, from Kelly Hewson-Fisher. Now, Kelly is Director and Head of Rural Research for Savills. And at Savills, she leads a team providing insight and thought leadership into for the rural sector. She's also a director of the Oxford Farming Conference, and she is going to talk to us about creating environmental solutions and long-term capital growth on UK farmland. Kelly.
Good afternoon. I am very well aware I now stand between you and lunch. So I will definitely crack on. Thank you very much, Kaz, for that introduction. I am Kelly Hewson-Fisher, Head of Rural Research for Savills, and thank you to John and to Robert for the invitation to speak to you today. I've got 2 points in my presentation where audience participation is required. No need to look nervous at all. It's simply a hand up or not, as the case may be. For the first question, if I can just ask you to be honest, and I promise I won't take offence at all. So here's my first question. How many of you were aware that Savills had a rural research team? Okay, so maybe about 20, 30 in a room of 150? No, 220. So excellent. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the team so that I can prove my justification for being up here talking to you today. So as Kaz said, we're a team of 10. We operate across the UK rural sector. And we have sort of 4 key focuses or areas. The first is policy. So we look to track policy, look at the impacts and the implication of on the UK rural sector. The second is data. So we collate, analyse, interrogate data, and some of that I'm going to show you in my slides today. The third is research. So we use different research methods, qualitative, quantitative research, underpinned by our data and our policy to produce publications such as these. So the farmland market and the global farmland market I'm going to refer to today. But these are free and publicly available for you to utilise in your conversations. And then finally, we undertake consultancy projects, so bespoke projects for clients. The last 2, the first of those has been on regenerative agriculture, so a review of regenerative agriculture, a very topical word. And the second has been on a review of the commercial viability of paludiculture, so growing crops on wetted peatlands. So you can see the variation in the work that we do, which is absolutely brilliant. So that's enough about me. So hopefully I've justified my existence and actually been on this stage. But today I'm going to give you an update on the land market. So firstly, we're going to look at Great Britain, and then we're going to look, you do have to press this quite hard, don't you? Great Britain, and then we're going to have a very brief look at the global farmland market. And then I've just got a couple of slides on land use to try and instigate some conversation over lunch, which would be great. So firstly, a question I often get asked is, why should we invest in farmland? Why should we invest in land? For us, land continues to be seen as a really good long-term asset class for investment, and we'll have a look in a moment at the data to underpin that. It continues to perform well against inflation, especially when compared to other asset classes. It's seen as a stable haven for those long-term portfolios, and we don't see the high and low fluctuations like we do see in the property residential markets. And we generally see a steady capital increase year on year, which we're going to have a look at now. So having a look at the market across the country, let's remind ourselves, 6% of land is urban, 94% is countryside. Of that 94%, as we heard earlier, 70% is used for agriculture. but just less than, or approximately 1% is transacted each year within that marketplace. Our data is collating publicly marketed transactions. So we know that there are private transactions that take place, and our data collects and collates the publicly marketed data. So what can we see? Well, in Great Britain, up to Q3 2025, so we report on this market every quarter. So at the end of the third quarter 2025, we saw 148,000 acres of farmland being marketed during that period. This is compared to 169,000 in the same period the previous year. So we're seeing a decrease of 13%. And in a moment on another slide, I'm going to show you a forecast that we do every January. And you'll see that this sort of mirrors what we forecasted back in early January as well. Just some data coming in on top of that. I did have a look at what that looked like at the end of October for you. So we're looking at about 159,400 acres. So still down on the previous year, but not as much as the third quarter. So we've still got a little bit of time to go to the end of the year. What we're seeing, though, is very much a similar pattern to what we saw in the period 2012 to 2016, which we sort of class as our pre-Brexit period. So we're seeing similar activity. But what you can see is that it's a far cry from what we saw in 1998, 97, 98, 99, where we saw over 300,000 acres being brought to the market. So when we start looking at how that compares across the different nations, we've heard, agriculture is a devolved matter, but how does that compare across the different nations? We can see in England, 107,000 acres were brought to the market during that period to end of September, compared to 125,000 the previous year, a decrease of 15%. Scotland, a similar sentiment, a decrease of 8%, and Wales, a similar sentiment, a decrease of 3%. There are huge regional and local differences within those figures, though. So if we just take England on its own, we've seen East Midlands in particular increase by 18%. So there's been an increase in the East Midlands area of land coming to the market, particularly the arable land. So we'll have a look at that in a moment. I thought this was quite interesting, just looking at the number of farms that come to the market versus the number of acres that come to the market. So you can see the trend since 1995 to date. And over the recent years, you can see an increase in the number of farms that have been marketed. And in that 2025 period, you can see that reduction. And we'll see what happens by the end of the year. The average size of farm that's been coming to the market is about 190 acres. But again, there's huge regional, local differences. So, just take that average with a pinch of salt. I really like this slide. I think this is really interesting to start looking at that horn versus corn debate. So looking at where the arable land plays against the livestock. So we've split our data between arable, dairy, livestock, and mixed. And you can see the variations between a 10-year average last year and the period up to September this year. So we know that beef and lamb prices have been good. Cereal prices have fallen over the past 18 months, 2 years, and margins for combinable crops are fairly low. So we did some analysis back in the summer, and that showed that inflation-adjusted wheat gross margins had fallen by 59%, oilseed rate by 25% over the last 5-year period. So coupled that with the sharp reduction in the de-linked payments for 25-26 in England, this could be what's prompting that land market, particularly across that arable sector. So let's have a look at values then. So that was farmland markets, how much land is coming to the market. Let's have a quick look at the values there. So the Savills Farmland Value Survey shows that during the first 9 months of 2025, the average value of prime arable land in Great Britain fell by 2.1% to £10,000 an acre. But you can see the trend over the period since 1992. Additionally, for the same period, so up to the end of Q3 2025, the average value of all types of land in Great Britain fell by 0.6% to £8,250 per acre. But as with land coming to the market, there are regional and local differences with values that you must be aware of. So, for example, up to the period at the end of September, Northern England, their values had actually increased. Additionally, if we start looking at sectors, prime dairy land had increased by 2.3% over that period due to the demand. But let's see how that fares now milk prices are starting to pull back again. So it's a watching brief, as always. I thought this one was, again, interesting. I say interesting on every slide, don't I? But I thought this one was quite interesting. Just looking at the impact of different external factors on land values as we go through. And there we've actually pulled out the different land types as well. So looking at arable, livestock, dairy land. But you can see where we've had some little blips, but how quick those prices are to recover. So going forward, again, let's see what happens with all of the external factors that we're currently contending with and where we go going forward. So what we also do as part of our data research is look at who is in the market, who's buying land, who's selling land. And again, this is really interesting to look at what land is being utilised for. So annually, we undertake this review of buyers and sellers. So this was done in 2024, and we'll redo the assessment in 2020. This was 2025. We'll redo the assessment in 2026. So why are landowners selling the land? So we've got 29% looking at investment elsewhere, 27% selling because of debt and financial restructuring, and then 18% because of a death within the family or because of other personal reasons. If we then look at reasons for buying land, what we can still see is the overwhelming factor for buying land is still to farm. Sorry, Robert, can you see those slides? Is still to farm that land. What we did do was a piece of analysis looking that over the last 5 years, 62% of acreage purchased was non-farmers. So 16% of that was purchased due to investment or development opportunities, 21% of those intending to farm, and from an institutional or corporate purchase, environmental motivations accounted for 33%, followed by investment and development. And that, I don't think, surprises anybody in the room. But what we do know is that change is certainly on the way, and change is certainly a word used quite a lot today. So those stats were from a DEFRA farmer opinion tracker that said 8.2% of farmers expect to retire within the next 3 to 5 years, and 3% expect to leave farming for other reasons. We collect data on machinery dispersal sales, so looking at how much machinery or which farms are dispersing and why. So we look at the reasons behind that. And our data would certainly suggest over a 3-year period, there are more changes happening than potentially what the DEFRA stats are showing. So as I mentioned, we look at forecasts. So every January, we look, well, I stand on a stage with my residential counterpart and my commercial counterpart, and we look and see if we can predict the next 5 years. So we get our crystal balls out and have a look at what's going to happen over the next 5-year period. I've just mentioned land is really a long-term asset class investment. So predicting over a 5-year period, it always gives us a little bit of a headache. But what we forecasted was that certainly over the periods 25-26, that land coming to the market would probably pull back as it was on previous years, as farmers look to, and investors, landowners, look to the changes that are happening and reviewing their businesses. And in that same period, we suggested that values would stand on. There would be no great growth from a capital perspective for those same reasons. Okay, so just moving on to a global perspective, hence the name of your conference, looking at this global position. So as I mentioned, we do collate information across the globe. So the Savills Global Farmland Index is based on an average value of prime farmland in US dollars per hectare in 15 key farmland markets. And I'm going to read them so I don't miss one. Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Ireland, New Zealand, Poland, Romania, Spain, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Uruguay. And we group those into 5 major geographical regions: Western Europe, Central Europe, Australasia, North America, and South America. And you can see that information there. So the land values are indexed back to when we started this index in 2002, and average values are used. And it should be noted with our data across GB, there are certainly variations within those countries as well. So the average, again, is an average across them. So since 2002, our research has shown a consistent global increase in average farmland values with a compound annual growth rate of 11% during that period. And much of that growth did come off the back of the 2008 financial crisis, as you can see on the graph there. Average farmland values continue to rise and climb through to 2014, followed by a more moderate period of growth up to 2020, that COVID period. However, values then rebounded sharply, 2021, posting an 18% increase, and growth has continued ever since. And in 2024, we recorded an exceptional annual performance of 18% again, its strongest since that 2021 period. South America has been dominant and a dominant contributor to that rise, with a combination of increased international attention and also currency movements as well. And this is, again, another interesting slide looking at global farmland prices against other asset classes. So we look at the long-term value growth and stability of farmland relative to other asset classes. Farmland, as you can see there, significantly outperforms the other commodity benchmarks illustrated. So over that past 23-year period, farmland values have shown less volatility and have just not recorded the fluctuations that you can see there from other commodity asset markets. So it's mainly driven by the fact that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we only trade about 1% of farmland across the UK, and that's similar globally as well. So it's driven by the fact that farmland isn't traded as often as the other asset classes. But also, farmland isn't just a commodity asset, is it? For many, it's our homes, it's our livelihood, it's our community. It's recognising that social dimension of farmland are all essential components. So we've done the GB farmland market, we've done the global farmland market. I've just got a couple of comments in my last 2 minutes looking at land use. So operationally and strategically, the sector continues to transition, as we know, from those cap support payments. And we're in this changing period. So historically, we've centred on food, fuel and fibre from our land. And going forward, certainly looking at how we can integrate development, energy and the environment. We have targets for many of those. So for the environment, it's said in order to meet all of the targets within the Environment Act, we'd need 18 million acres, an area twice the size of Wales. But for me, 2 specific points that I just want to bring out that my team are really focusing on going forward, which we'll all be pleased to hear. The first being food. So we talk a lot about food, but certainly from my team looking at what does that mean going forward. And we're due to produce a publication next summer, specifically on the good food cycle and other elements that we've heard about today. So we produce food and it's under scrutiny. And it was interesting hearing Dame Angela Eagle earlier say food security is more important than ever. And I think I heard correctly that the primary function of our land is food production. But you can all correct me if I'm wrong, and she's not here to confirm that. But I'm sure that's what I heard. But what we produce, as we all know, is really being affected. And it was interesting hearing Huw Irranca-Davies as well, saying that global norms are disruptive rather than reliable. And hearing Tim Benton on Monday night, he quoted, "If we can't predict the exact risks, only that something will happen, we need to focus on resilience." And my last comment is about water, a subject close to my heart, definitely. And this is my last point at which it's audience participation. If you could put up your hands, do you feel that we have enough water in the UK? Yes, hand up. No, hand down. Interesting. 5 of you think we've got enough water out of the 220. Interesting. According to the data, we are going to need 5 billion litres of water per day by 2050 if we do nothing, driven by climate change, population growth, and environmental protection and recovery. So certainly something that we need to talk about. My top 3 key takeaways, I've got 2 seconds. My top 3 key takeaways from my presentation, 3 things fundamental to life: food, water, and the environment. And as a sector, we can provide for all. By collaborating as an industry, we have the ability to forge our own destiny, as well as align with government frameworks. And my last point, land continues to be a good asset class for that long-term investment. Thank you.
Kelly, Hewson-Fisher, thanks so much for that. Lots of food for thought there. Come over here, sit right down, but don't relax, because I'm going to come straight in with a couple of questions for you, since we have just been hearing from you. Loads of questions that are coming in on Slido. There might be 1 or 2 in the audience as well, so if you would like to ask a question in person, please give me a big wave, and then we can get the microphone to you. On Slido, we have a question here. What's your prediction of the number of farms over the next 5 years? How many people are going to be selling up? Because that's something that people have been talking about, what's going to happen with the changes to inheritance tax on farms and family farms.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really interesting looking at the comments around the inheritance tax and will it impact and enforce those sales. We did a little bit of analysis in our farmland market publications, so you can certainly go and have a look at the data. But just reading some of those stats that we created from our data, 88% of the UK's farmland will be impacted by the APR and BPR reform. 50% of a generation's profit will be needed to pay the inheritance tax on a 400-acre farm, was our example. So I think it would be naive to say that it's not going to have an impact. We were talking about this last night with Jonathan and talking about that there probably will be further consolidation within the sector. But ultimately, in terms of values and how that's going to play out of land value, it is going to take a material supply and demand dynamic to change values. We've predicted about 160,000 acres will come to market this year and next, with that slightly rising as farms, landowners really get to grips with the impacts.
Okay, Elliott, I want to ask you some questions. We've got loads of questions that have come in for you. Can Elliott expand on what types of unintended consequences might occur with the use of AI in agriculture? Are we taking the genie out of the bottle here?
Well, for that, you have to buy the book, which I haven't finished yet. Gosh, I mean, there is, and I don't want to diminish the importance of this, an enormous list. Each of those 5 things I showed you have unintended consequences. Let me just check off a few. As data becomes widely available, I think there's a real risk that data is used against farmers' best interests. This is something that farmers are very worried about, and so one of the unintended consequences is, will farmers perhaps sort of start to go dark, right? Turn off sensors, not share data, which will actually be a loss for everyone. On the second one, the knowledge economy, clearly, if you are in the business of selling knowledge, that's going to be, well, perhaps the intended consequence of using AI. But there will be some very interesting unintended consequences. If everyone has access to the world's best agronomy knowledge that's personalized and localized, what do we think will happen? Well, one potential is yields and productivity will go up to sort of a new average, a higher average. I think that's generally good, unless that increase in supply can't be absorbed by the market, in which case prices go down. So, and I'll go to I'll give you one more unintended consequence, which is a fun one. If AI agents really do happen, and they actually start negotiating on our behalf with each other, sort of imagine a sort of digital dark smoky room where our AI agents are off negotiating with each other, a couple of things could happen. They could actually discover that collusion is a very good way to sort of have outcomes, which we may not have visibility to, and we may no longer understand what they're doing. So I think there's sort of a potential loss of control once these agents start doing things on their own.
Okay, how can we accommodate the energy infrastructure that's going to be needed for AI?
Yeah, well, right now I think AI uses about 2% of energy, give or take, and we're expecting it to be 1,000 times more powerful in 10 years. You can do the math, something's going to give. Now, on the other hand, we haven't really optimized the efficiency of chips yet. We can have AI design its own chips, they'll be much more efficient. We can transform the way we program these, train these AI models. So I actually think that we will get more efficiencies because we must, but I do think there will be a trade-off where AI will start to be the highest value and best use of energy, which means anyone who is a low value user of energy will see their prices go up. I don't think there's any way to avoid that.
Kelly?
Yeah, I was just going to add a point on data centers. Number one is the water requirement for a data center, and looking at whether we have got that in our calculations when we're looking at water requirements going forward. And the second is land. There's lots of speculation as to the value of land where a data center potentially could be. And there's some astronomical numbers being bandied around. So wait and see on that one.
Well, they're also talking about putting data centers in space now. So I honestly think the UK won't be a very attractive market for data centers. Cost of energy, cost of land. Google just put one on Christmas Island. So you can put your data centers in some pretty odd places.
Okay.